Hi everybody, in this video I'm starting to do the design of a Jankerl. That's a Bavarian traditional fashion, and I like these jackets, but I never made one. So I looked up many of those Jankerls to see what they have in common in design, so I can pick what I can do with my limited capabilities and patience. I'm not a fashion or tradition expert, but what I have seen and learned is that they are usually made out of loden wool. They usually most often have a garter stitch or some sort of other patterns like cables. They have usually colors around the edges and fancy buttons. Let me mention this is for my daughter who currently lives near Munich, and she brought me some wool for Jankerls. You see a little image of it to the very right. On the very left you see the alpaca wool I used for the two jackets I did before. My Singer knitting machine is not really for bulky material, so I have to see how to work with such a thick yarn. So let's give it a try. It's very hard to push that carriage. Here is the result using every needle on stitch size 12. It does work, but I think the machine didn't like it too much. I tried it again using every other needle, so skipping every other needle. You can see through a little bit, but I think that's lighter. Was done with stitch size 6 and very easy to knit. So next I need to try to get a garter stitch or some sort of patterns done with that thick wool. I went to Walmart to buy some equally thick wool in a similar color to explore my options. First I'm trying to do this pattern out of the Singer manual. This is how that cast on looks. That's the setting in the front. And the setting in the back. Oops, I need to change to 7. Then it says move the front bed 1 notch to the right, ease up, and go 2 rows again. Move the front bed 1 to the left, and go 2 rows again. Yep, stuck. With that thick wool, that's just not really working smooth enough, but I keep trying. It's actually not that bad. I'm not sure if it looks like a traditional Jankerl fabric. Plus, if you look at these curly things, that didn't happen with me on neither side. I think that's because I have every other needle, so it's not enough to shift the bed by 1 notch, the front bed. I probably need to shift it by 2 notches. Let me try it again and also do some variations. Wedging the front bed by 2 notches actually matches now the pattern. I have these curly things, I have them here. I tried other things like not stretching and stuff, but that looks actually the best. Next I'm trying this fancy pattern from the Superba manual. Slightly different needle setting, but basically the same idea. Different front back carriage setting, but let me try if it works. Already cast it on and did several rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, clack, clack, 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, that seemed to have worked and is decently nice looking. I like that too. So for the next test I casted on some stockinette waist yarn. And I'm now taking the real wool. After 10 rounds of stockinette, I'm trying to set up some patterns on the front bed. I try to do a 2-thin cable here, and I try to build a diamond out of that line here. So here I basically moved the stitch one to the left and pulled from the front side an additional piece of yarn to create 2 stitches, so I can start moving them. On that side I'm not sure how it will work, so this is like a test. Actually I need the 3-prong. Let me move those cables just 1 notch to the left, a little bit. I can actually spare you the details of all of this because it did not really work out as well. So I fast forward a little bit and then show you the result. The result: I cast on a few rows straight stockinette, showing the pearl side. Then my attempt to shape a diamond. Well, mostly that diamond worked. I got a hole here, that's probably the stitch I picked up from the back bed, and I got some holes here. And the cable, well, you can kind of recognize it, but I would need to learn more on cabling. Next I will try to do this pattern. It also looks like it has potential. I moved all stitches to the back bed, knit a few rows, and I'm now going to try the next pattern, which is to tuck every other stitch. For 2 rows. 1 row tuck, 2 row tuck. Then I'm gonna turn these buttons to knit the stitches that are outside, and I go 2 rows. And then I tuck the other needles, alternative needles. Make sure I undo those things and tuck again. And redo those things and knit them. And I do that for a few rows. I think the result looks pretty appealing. This would definitely work for such a Bavarian Jankerl. For the next test, I'm gonna try to do some garter stitches. The tough thing with Gartner and the knitting machine, you need to constantly transfer the stitches from the back bed to the front bed and vice versa. I failed with that transfer tool several times. Now with my newer machine there came a new transfer tool that actually has those brushes. Those were missing last time. But I already did a couple dozen at least tests and failed miserably every time. So let me do one more slow test and see if it works. I now inserted a styrofoam block that I cut to size, manually adjusted the bed, and as you can hopefully see, those needles are much closer together now. That diagonal surface pushes the ledge up while that needle is moving out. And then you will see how this needle from the receiving side will slide into the stitch. So this is how it's supposed to work. That needle slid into the stitch, and the sending needle can now drop its sledge and push through. And this process is gonna repeat. But as you can see, for example, here, that needle didn't go into the stitch, it went beside the stitch. That needle didn't go in the stitch, it went beside the stitch. Let's see what's gonna happen here. Let me improve the lighting. Yeah, it will slide beside the stitch. The stitch is not wide enough for it to insert. That's one problem with the thick wool. Another problem I've experienced in my test is that the needle actually pushes through some of the yarn, which will also not work. I try that again. This time I use stitch size 10 and I try now what happens if the needle is positioned slightly to the left of the sending needle. Maybe that helps. Needless to say, also that failed. Now again, slightly on the right side. It sends it up, hit, partial hit, no hit, partial hit, no hit, no hit, no hit, full hit. That's worthless to continue. I manually did a garter stitch. I mean manually transferred the stitches back and forth to test how it would work on a hem on the colored side. And yes, this would actually really look good, but I won't do this for an entire jacket. That's too much work. I did a swatch using that type of fabric. While it looks nice, I ran into two problems. Number one, I lost a stitch without noticing it, and it's hard to correct anything in flight. And the second problem, this fabric uses so much wool that the wool I had was not enough. So I made another swatch using the other technique. It's basically tucking every other needle, but I only tucked one, not twice, because the thickness of the yarn, tucking once is much easier. So tuck every other needle once, then knit 2 rows with all needles, and then tuck the other needle, every other needle. And I'm pretty happy with the result. Yes, I got a little mistake here, but if I pay enough attention, I should be able to fix it. Since everything is knitted on one bed only, it's also easier to do any corrections. And I got enough wool for that. So this is what I'm gonna do. Next, I need to find out how to do the colors around the edges and the buttonholes. Checking out several examples, I can see that the colors are knitted around the perimeters of the fabric, as you can see with these lines. So I think I can simply do the buttonholes while I add the colors on the side. Here are the buttons my daughter bought. They look nice. First thing I'm gonna try for the color edges is a full rib. I know it probably won't look right, but I want to try it. So I cast it on, knit 6 rows, actually 5 rows of full rib. And I'm now going into a waste yarn to see how it looks like. It looks nice, but then again, both sides look the same, and this is not how typically a Jankerl would look like. Next, I want to try to do the garter stitch again. I knitted the first row. I transferred up stitches and did the first row, and I'm now manually transferring the stitches onto the front bed. Those stitches felt a little tight to transfer, so I increased the stitch size from 7.5 to 9 and give it another shot. Let me try that magical garter bar that I got with my new machine. This is the first time I'm actually trying it, so bear with me. So it says to push the bar under the needle. Yeah, a bit. Then to use that little push thing and push the needles up. Then turn around that little push thing and place it on the upper rail and push the needles down. Push them down. I guess I need to manually help. I manually push the needles down. So now I got the stitches on that thing. Next it says to place it so that thing rests on the back bed. Ooh, scary. And then I use that lever again and push the needles, the respective needles up. I should have bring them into working position first, I guess. Let me try manually. This will be the first one to come. Let me try from the center. I think this would work. This one would go underneath, but I guess everything else seems to work. This one is too tight and doesn't go through. This one went underneath. And then I pull the garter bar out and I have the needles on the back bed. Once I get used to this, it might probably be simpler than manually transferring. That garter bar, well, it kind of works, but sometimes it picks up the stitch below. Overall, it doesn't look too bad. I think that might be interesting. On the other hand, the stitches are pretty far apart. Maybe I need to knit this yarn with every needle instead of every other needle. That definitely needs more wiggling. If just the garter stitch wouldn't be that much effort. Next I made a little test with just stockinette. This is the pearl side of it, and quite honestly I actually like it. It's simple and it looks like it would fit to a Jankerl. I tried the garter stitch again, but this time used every needle. It definitely looks better than the previous test where I used every other needle, but I'm not sure I like it more than just a regular stockinette. I think this is what I'm gonna do, but I'm trying to do a roll hem because that fabric will roll anyway. So I'll probably try to get 4 rows, maybe 5 rows, then fold it over and do the other 5 rows and knit it together. But I have to do some special hanging because I need the pearl side, not the stitch side. I cast it on and knitted a few rows in waste yarn. I'm now adding a ravel cord, and then I go with the real color in stitch size 10 and I go 11 rows. So for the last row I use stitch size 12, so it's easier to transfer. Once again showing that magic garter bar, and tap, 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 tap. Meanwhile I can push 2 in a row and then push 2 or 3 back. Then I have the stitches here. And then I'm pushing out those needles. And if I do this right, it typically works. And then I can pull that thing out. And voila, I have my stitches on the front bed. And then I'm picking up the stitches from the bottom and bring them onto the back bed. This way I have the purl side visible. After that I pushed my bed up a little bit, and now I need to transfer the stitches from the front bed onto the back bed, and I can pull them out because I need to get the stitches behind the latch anyway. I'm gonna leave that waste yarn in place, and I think later, once I remove that ravel cord, I should get the waste yarn out of there. Let me try to knit that stuff together. I'm not sure if this is gonna work because it's so thick. I now try to add 2 rows of the dark test yarn here. 1, 2. I use stitch size 12 because it's just a thin yarn, thick yarn. Let me add a 3rd line. Okie doke. And then I'm gonna cast off a few stitches in the middle to test a buttonhole. The idea is later I'm knitting that piece, excluding the buttonhole of course, to the end fabric, to the fabric of the jacket, and this way I basically get my my colored corner to the fabric, I have my buttonhole, and everything is done. I don't really know how to cast off with such a thing without a yarn. So I'm just doing it the way I'm used to do. Sorry if it's more complicated than it needs to be. But I would basically move the stitch to its neighboring needle. Tap. Move the yarn in and pull it through. And I move the stitch to its neighboring needle. Pull the yarn in and pull it through. And so on. So I now cast it off a few stitches to build a buttonhole. So I'm hacking in the stitches. It's probably faster than casting off and manually knitting together. Let's see how it looks like once it's done. So the assumed to be jacket is on the needles now. I also had to put it into the needles where I have the buttonhole, because this side of the jacket has to knit. And I'm adding more weights and give it a shot. Would have helped if I would have put a yarn in. So let me see at least if I can pull the ravel cord out. Yep, that has worked. And if that stuff comes out, yep, that comes out. And this would be now the edge. It's a little thick, but I still like it. It has the pearl side visible. I added some gray. Here you can see the buttonhole. And if it would have worked, it would have connected to the rest of the jacket of the Jankerl. And I think that's the strategy I'm going to work with. So this basically concludes the first part of the planning video. I've got 2 swatches, I've got the strategy on how I knit that stuff. I got the dimensions my daughter needs. So next step is to convert the inches into stitches and rows and start knitting. Just be patient for the next video because I probably won't start until December, and who knows how long I need until it's finished. Thank you. Bye.